From burying his whole family in 7 days straight,
Sister died, my grandfather died, and Big Pun died the same week.
to watching 6 homies drop dead from heart attacks in 12 months,
It's like 6 friends last year to heart attacks.
sending him into a dark mental hole for 2 whole years.
Depressed, seeing a psychiatrist for 2 years.
But real talk, Fat Joe been through way worse than this. And it's low-key a miracle the brother's still breathing. Let me put you on game. The perfect storm. Born Joseph Antonio Cartagena on August 19, 1970 in the South Bronx. Fat Joe came up from the grimy forest houses projects in Morrisania during an era when the South Bronx was straight apocalyptic. Drugs, shooters on every corner, and mad urban decay. His childhood wasn't just rough, it was survival mode 24/7. Raised by Puerto Rican and Cuban parents in a hood where crack was destroying families and gunshots were the everyday soundtrack. Young Joe learned quick that life in the trenches was fragile and tomorrow wasn't promised to nobody. But nothing, not the block violence, not the poverty, not even years of hustling just to eat could have prepared him for the year 2000. That year would become what Joe himself calls a perfect storm of grief that damn near broke him completely.
Passed away, I went through depression. Him, but I'm not just saying depression lightly. Real depression. It was him, my sister, and my grandfather at the same time. So I was going through so much and everybody doubted me. Everybody, my closest.
In February 2000, Christopher Rios, better known as Big Pun, died from a heart attack at just 28 years old. Big Pun wasn't just Fat Joe's artist or his terror squad day one. He was Joe's brother from another mother, his twin flame, his most trusted soldier. Big Pun was pushing nearly 700 pounds when he passed, a weight that put crazy strain on his ticker. When Big Pun collapsed at a White Plains hotel, and the paramedics couldn't even revive him because of his size, Fat Joe lost more than his mans. He lost a piece of his soul. But the nightmare didn't stop there. Within that same devastating stretch, Fat Joe's sister died from complications during childbirth, slipping into a coma after receiving an epidural, and his grandfather passed shortly after. 3 funerals in a matter of weeks, 3 devastating L's that sent Joe spiraling into what he describes as an inescapable darkness. A depression so deep, so suffocating that it would take him 2 full years to even start seeing daylight again.
Me get depressed. I was depressed, seeing a psychiatrist for 2 years. I gained a lot of weight, started drinking. I just went through a lot because it was hard for me.
The depression that followed wasn't just being sad or mourning. It was a mental prison that Fat Joe describes as solving the most complex Rubik's Cube you could ever try to figure out inside his own dome. Every single day became a war against his own thoughts. A battle where even moments of potential happiness would get sabotaged by his brain sending him messages telling him, "We're not supposed to be happy." What made it worse was that Joe couldn't escape the reminders. Feel me? Everywhere he went, people would come up with their condolences about Big Pun. Every interview became a trigger. Every fan encounter reopened the wound. As he explained, everybody in the world keeps coming up to me, sorry for your loss, not knowing that they're triggering the depression every single time.
What's going on with you?
Oh man, that was when, I've told this story before, is when my sister died, my grandfather died, and Big Pun died the same week.
Wow.
So it was like 3 in a row.
The physical toll was devastating. Son Joe's weight, which had always been substantial, ballooned to dangerous levels. He gained mad weight as he turned to stress eating and drinking to cope with the pain. At his heaviest, Fat Joe weighed approximately 470 pounds, putting himself at extreme risk for the same heart-related death that had taken his best friend. His diabetes, which he'd been diagnosed with at just 11 or 12 years old, spiraled out of control. He was on a collision course with death, following Big Pun straight to the grave. But what really broke him wasn't just the grief. It was the guilt. That survivor's guilt of watching his best friend die from obesity-related issues, while he himself was headed down the exact same path. At Big Pun's funeral, Joe had what he describes as an Ebenezer Scrooge moment, staring at Pun's young daughter, who was the same age as his own, and seeing his own future death played out right in front of him. The depression manifested in wild ways. Joe would step outside and the sunny day would look like nighttime to him. He would go into his bathtub with no water and just stay there looking at the ceiling all night. His world had become a dark, suffocating cell. And even though he swears he was never kill myself because he'd still enjoy life's simple pleasures like a steak and some rice and beans, the reality was that he was dying slowly, painfully from the inside out. What saved Fat Joe was a combination of professional help and a crucial turning point. He saw a shrink for 2 straight years, slowly learning about himself and how to navigate the overwhelming grief. The therapy taught him to recognize his triggers, to actively combat unhappiness by running toward joy instead of wallowing in the sadness. He learned to find happiness in simple things. Visiting his modest childhood crib brought him the biggest smile. Watching movies like John Wick 4 or Air. Even just watching CNN became sources of light in the darkness. But the real wake-up.
We was doing the Big Pun mural. Shout out the Tats crew, they just did it over in the Bronx. And 2 dudes walked by. And then one dude was like, yo, they doing the Big Pun wall. And then the other dude was like, where? He was like, yeah, they do it all the time. You know, it's been 2 years since he died. Then I heard 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. And that's when I snapped out of it. Because I was like, yo, it's 2 years, bro. Like, you got to wake up.
But grief don't just disappear, it transforms. And for Fat Joe, that pain didn't fade when the funerals ended. It shifted from his heart to his body. From depression to self-destruction, the weight of survival. If the year 2000 was Fat Joe's descent into hell, the years that followed became his climb back to the light. But this wasn't no fairy tale comeback story with a neat, clean ending. This was a brutal years-long battle against his own body, his own mind, and the crushing realization that if he didn't change everything, he was going to die young, just like Big Pun. The numbers tell a stark story. My G. At his peak weight, Fat Joe tipped the scales at around 470 to 480 pounds. Some accounts suggest he may have approached 500 pounds. For context, Big Pun weighed 698 pounds when he died at 28. Joe was on the same trajectory, carrying what he would later describe as 3 human beings' worth of weight on his frame. His body was a ticking time bomb.
Weight loss. Like, I don't even recognize you right now. Like, yo, how many pounds?
Like 100 pounds.
100 pounds.
100 pounds. I dropped the body on him, man.
But what truly pushed Joe to make drastic changes wasn't vanity or even his doctor's warnings. It was death. Specifically, the deaths of 6 more friends in a single year, all from heart attacks. These weren't elderly men or people with obvious health issues. These were Joe's peers, his friends, people who looked healthy, who were telling jokes one day and dead the next. As Joe recounted an emotional interview.
Funerals I went to last year for, you know, they look healthy to me. They was just like me. They was telling jokes like me. You know, they was cool like me. You know what I'm saying? And they all.
One funeral in particular shattered something inside him. Watching his friend's daughter, the same age as his own, walk up to her father's casket. Joe experienced what he describes as almost like a Twilight Zone moment where he could see his own funeral, his own daughter mourning his own premature death. He realized as he told interviewers.
And I was like, yo, Joe, you know, us rappers, you know, we make money, you know, the girls think we handsome sometimes. We start thinking we superheroes, but we're really not. We're human beings.
The wake-up calls kept coming. Big Pun's death in 2000 had been the first major alarm. Then came the string of friends dying from heart attacks. But Joe also had to confront his own type 2 diabetes diagnosis from childhood, which had been spiraling out of control. His family's eating habits, traditional Latin American cooking with lard, whole milk, and high-calorie staples like rice, beans, and fried foods had contributed to his early-onset diabetes and lifelong struggle with weight.
So once Pun died, I went on a diet and lost like 100, but that was, you know, I didn't know what I know now. You know what I'm saying? So that ran its course to that 350, 360 going up and down like that. And then I just had to turn it up because, you know, I lost like 6 friends last year to heart.
So Joe embarked on what would become a 15-plus year journey to lose over 200 pounds. This wasn't no quick fix or celebrity crash diet. Now this was a complete lifestyle overhaul that required him to fundamentally change his relationship with food, exercise, and his own body. The approach was methodical and scientific. Joe learned to view his body like a computer that processes nutrients differently. He cut out bread, pasta, and rice, the staples that had defined his Puerto Rican and Cuban upbringing. He replaced spaghetti with zucchini alternatives, used sugar substitutes like Splenda on sweet potato mash, and practiced strict portion control. Feel me? His exercise routine was equally deliberate but sustainable. He started with just 10-minute sessions on the elliptical, earning him the nickname Elliptical King from his manager, and gradually built up to 45 minutes. He biked around Miami for cardio. Crucially, he avoided trainers and rigid gym schedules. Instead, he advocated for baby steps to avoid burnout and injury.
Mistake they do to you if you go to work out is if your man work out, says, "Oh God, you big," and they throw the biggest weights on you. You never going back.
Don't need that.
You don't need that cardio walking. Then the elliptical's good on your knees. Before you know it, all you need is a...
The results were transformative, but gradual. By 2011, he had lost enough weight to eliminate his insulin shots, a milestone he celebrated in his track Drop a Body, where he WPP'd about shedding weight. By the early 2020s, he had lost over 200 pounds, dropping from 470 pounds to around 255 pounds. In recent years, he's incorporated Ozempic, a GLP-1 agonist originally for type 2 diabetes, calling it the greatest invention ever for appetite suppression and maintaining his progress. But the weight loss journey wasn't just about the physical transformation. It was deeply intertwined with his mental health recovery. The depression that had consumed him after the 200 losses was partly fueled by the vicious cycle of grief, emotional eating, and further weight gain. As he lost weight, he also regained mental clarity and emotional stability. He learned to monitor his mental triggers religiously, crediting therapy and sobriety. He developed a strong aversion to the family addiction cycles he'd witnessed for his survival. Yet, despite his dramatic transformation, Joe made a conscious decision to keep his stage name, Fat Joe. Why? Because he wanted to inspire others by reminding them of how big he was and showing them that weight loss was possible, as he explained in interviews.